Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video we're going to revisit the unsolved, unresolved, mysterious Zodiac killings which occurred in my zip code or close by when I was a Oakland Tribune newspaper boy back in 1969. 69 was a busy year, as you know. Many of my videos focus on the activities of the late 1960s, which would include the My Lai massacre, Operation Phoenix CIA, the Zodiac killings, the Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger CIA on CIA murder killings involving Lino LaBianca, which, don't make me say it again, those were military M7 bayonet attacks, My Lai massacre style. This weapon was used in My Lai. This weapon was used with Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger, Tom Coomer, Wojtek Frykowski, Stephen Parent, Lino LaBianca, and Rosemary LaBianca. Right here. This is designed to go through ribs. It's double-edged. It's double-edged, sharp as razor. It's 5 millimeters thick. It's carbon steel. It's designed to attach to a rifle. And it will be a 6-inch blade when attached to a rifle. It's a 7-inch blade if you were attempting to use it on your own. That's not the wound pattern that was depicted at Cielo Drive in Waverly. It was definitely attached to a rifle for the most part. This is a buck knife. This is a weapon that was admitted into the Charles Manson murder case. This weapon was not used. This weapon was not used in the murder. God knows why Charles Older would allow a weapon that was not used in a murder to convict 5 people of murder by using props. But that's what they did, because there was no actual murder weapon found. He also admitted a Ronald Reagan replica 22 caliber pistol that could handle long rifle cartridges. That weapon ballistics test did not match the bullet patterns and the bullets pulled out of of 3 of the victims. So again, a weapon not used in the murder, admitted into a murder trial by a judge named Charles Older. One of the themes that's coming up on today's Zodiac video is the name Charles seems to be a real popular name, because we have Charles Older, who was the hanging judge who convicted 5 innocent people. Charles Watson, who was convicted separately. They didn't have him in the courtroom, and supposedly he did the murders. So then they convicted Charlie Manson and Susan Atkins and Patricia Krenwinkel and Leslie Van Houten. Those 4, who we all agreed Charlie Manson was not present during the murders, but nevertheless he was convicted of 7 murders. And the others are little girls, aged 21 and 19. And they did it. And then you have the real killer, who's in Texas in an unlocked jail cell, coming and going, having his girlfriend sleep overnight, and his uncle, who's the sheriff in Farmersville, Texas, he eventually gets brought out to Los Angeles and convicted by himself solo. Poppycock on every level. No defense offered either. Just like Sirhan Sirhan. Just like Jack Ruby. And Melvin Belli was his attorney. That's going to come into the Zodiac story. All right, let me set that aside for a second and just give you the facts of the case. I want you to keep in mind that you do know that big city police departments are fully infiltrated by the Invisible Hand clandestine services, as are the 2 newspapers in San Francisco, the Examiner and the Chronicle. One's owned by the William Randolph Hearst family, and the other is owned by the DeYoung family. And that's the only 2 newspapers that are in existence in San Francisco, and they're both published by one company. One corporation handles the publishing, which they both contribute to so that they don't beat each other's brains out. They also agreed that one will be the morning edition and one would be the afternoon edition. So the 2 newspapers of the DeYoung and the Hearst family don't really compete for news. They have a complete monopoly or a duopoly over the news, which I think, if you've been following my videos, the news is fake. It's fictional, and they're lucky to get names and age is correct. Everything else is made up. All right, so now the Zodiac case didn't start out with the astrological symbol Zodiac. It just started out as a mysterious shooting of two very young teenagers, on the night of December 20th, 1968. So it would have been a cold evening in the San Francisco Bay Area. And this was outside of the city limit of the city of Vallejo. City of Vallejo is in the northeast corner of the San Francisco Bay. It is across estuary from Mare Island, which is a military industrial island where nuclear-powered submarines and the Kaiser ships, Henry Kaiser used to build ships for World War II supply chain. And during the 60s, it was then converted into other Navy contracts and submarines. They had a submarine yard on Mare Island. It's very close proximity to where my number one suspect lives, Arthur Lee Allen, who, by the way, was in the United States Navy. And he's kind of a strange bird, Arthur Lee Allen. He was a diver in high school, and he was a good athlete and had good flexibility. And he's 6'1", and he was trim in high school, so he was probably 165 pounds to 170, and he was quite athletic. But anyway, be that as it may, on the evening of December 20th, 1968, David Faraday, age 17, had his first date with Betty Lou Jensen, age 16, and David Faraday borrowed his parents' Rambler station wagon. Now that's important because if you remember at the Sharon Tate murder site, Stephen Parent was killed in his parents' Rambler Ambassador sedan. So that was a two-door sedan. This is actually a four-door station wagon, same manufacturer, Rambler, but it's a different model car. Anyway, so David Faraday is going to pick up Betty Lou Jensen, and their parents were a little nervous because Betty had never gone on a date before, and their plan was to go to a Christmas concert at Betty Lou Jensen's high school, which at that time was called Hogan High School, and it is actually in very close proximity to where Darlene Ferrin lives. And you should know that, well, I'll come back to Darlene Ferrin in a minute. She is the third victim of the Zodiac. But you should know that Arthur Lee Allen lives in very close proximity to these addresses that I'm giving you. In other words, he's about, I don't know, 0.8 of a mile from Hogan High School. He's one block from Vallejo High School, which is, Hogan High School is now elementary level. It's intermediate. It's a junior high school, is what I'm trying to say. It's a junior high school. And Betty Lou Jensen at age 16 was too old to be in an intermediate or junior high school. So I'm assuming it was a high school back then. There was probably a higher population of kids in the city of Vallejo, which was a military industrial town. And lots of people worked for the Navy and or the contractors for the Navy in the city of Vallejo, which is not that large of a city, but it was busy. So the plan was to go to this concert at the high school, but of course that's not what happened. So David Faraday instead took Betty Lou to a friend's home where they spent some time, and then decided to drive out to Lake Herman. Now you can Google Lake Herman. You basically go east from where Betty Lou Jensen lived. You go on Solano Avenue and you head kind of northeast till you get to Columbus Parkway, and then you go up Columbus Parkway a third of a mile, not very far, turn right on Lake Herman Road and go out. The lake's about 2 miles out from that intersection of Columbus Parkway. And of course, they didn't go to the lake. They stopped at a Lover's Lane turnout about halfway. So they went about a mile. They went about a mile east on Lake Herman Road, and it's a hilly, uphill, downhill, rolling, and then it goes into a left-right chicane. Hit the brakes. There's a pullout on the north left side of Lake Herman Road. They park there. There's a rancher's gate. And again, the time estimate is about 10:15 p.m. they arrived at the pullout. Don't know what time David Faraday picked up Betty Lou, but I'm going to assume he picked her up, around 7 p.m. So they've been away for 3 hours, and now they're at the Lover's Lane. And there's not a lot of traffic on Lake Herman Road. However, there is some traffic. There was a oil tanker truck that was out there. There was a boy and a girl that were doing a speed run in a sports car. And then there was a young boy who lived at one of the local residences in close proximity to that Lover's Lane that identified a blue Impala or something sort of like a Chevy Impala. Blue, could have been a different model than Chevy, and saw two men in it heading west on Lake Herman Road, west away from the murder scene, because that is where David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were murdered. And as the crime scene forensics show, looking at it's a kind of a dirt gravel section pullout. You can Google it. It's still there. It's pretty much exactly the same. The gate has been upgraded, and the road that went up the hill has been paved because it was dirt. Everything was dirt back when the murder happened. This is, again, December 20th, 1968. It's a Friday night. It's Friday night. So we're heading to Christmas. We're not at Christmas yet, and it's probably a cold evening. And David Faraday turned the car, made a U-turn so that the car was more or less facing west, the opposite direction of how they drove. They were heading east. He makes a U-turn into the pullout and has the station wagon more or less facing west. And the killers, and I'm going to say a minimum of two. I'm big on teams, right? And Operation Gladio, CIA, NATO, always operates in squads of three-man squads. And I believe that was probably the situation. I believe there's probably three people involved, but they're not necessarily in the same automobile. You could have multiple cars involved. So, this is in the day when there was no surveillance cameras. God bless those days. Anyway, what you should know is that apparently a car heading from Lake Herman, which again is about 3/4 of a mile east of this pullout, was heading west and came up behind David and Betty and perhaps blinded them with the headlights into their rearview mirror and ended up parking to the right of them facing the same direction. And then I believe two men stepped out of the car. One walked around to the driver's side, the left side of the car of the Rambler station wagon, and proceeded to shoot David Faraday in his left temple, killing him. And then Betty Lou Jensen panicked, and a number of pistol shots, again this is .22 caliber Super X copper coated .22 rifle cartridges. Doesn't necessarily mean a rifle was used, but they are bullets that could be used with a rifle or a modified .22 caliber pistol, and it would probably have to be a semi-automatic because of the franticness of the shots, because there was a number of shots through the roof of the car and into the front passenger seat, and I don't know what hit Betty, but Betty got out of the passenger door and she ran frantically east toward Lake Herman, and she didn't get very far. She got about 30 feet, and she was shot 5 times in her back. And so she goes face down into the dirt gravel, and like I said, David Faraday is in the front seat of the car, shot in the head, dead, bleeding out. So that's that. And then the killers left. They also left, again, it's a little sketchy because we were told the police report, it was reported that the police said that there were 10 bullets fired. However, when you get into the nitty-gritty of the police reports, that's not, they can't prove 10. They can prove 9 bullets. Except the problem with that is they didn't find 9 bullets. They found 7 bullets. It's really annoying. This is really annoying. They found 8 bullets. They collected 8 bullets. They claim they found 9 Super X-22 shell casings, but they only could find 8 bullets. But they find 9 shell casings. Then, so they have 8 bullets, but they only send 7 to the lab. So I don't know why they didn't send 8 out of 8 to the lab. So there's a question. Why didn't this is the sheriff, by the way. This is in an unincorporated area between the city of Benicia, which is an oil town, oil refinery town, and the city of Vallejo, which is a Navy shipbuilding town and repairs. So you got big oil on one side, and you got big Navy on the other. And you got clandestine services throughout this zip code, okay? Because you can say it's sloppiness, but anyway, it's a little confusing because the first responder to the scene was a city of Vallejo policeman. But it's outside of his jurisdiction, so he just controlled the crime scene until the sheriff got there. Then the sheriff took over. Now that's important, people, because that's kind of sort of what happened with other crimes that I look into, is that they, like the Aaron Valente case, there's like 6 different law enforcement investigative agencies involved with the Aaron Valente case. And in the case of Zodiac, you're going to find, as I walk you through, there were 5 incidents. Make this straight. So 1, 2, 3. There are 4 incidents. There are 5 people who are murdered. There are 7 victims. There are 4 incidents. I'd like to say they're all shootings, but they're not. There's a stabbing with no gunshots. So there are 4 attacks. There are 4 official Zodiac attacks. There are 5 people who die. There are 2 people who are injured but don't die. And there are numerous law enforcement and district attorneys involved in these cases. Right? So that means, people, it's very hard for the investigators to get organized and coordinated. And it's very easy for the invisible hand to misdirect everybody in the public so that nobody knows what direction anything's going. So kind of like Google. It's like Google searches. Everything's artificial intelligence misdirected. So in the case of the David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, age 17 and 16, they find 9 shell casings of the Super X rifle long copper-coated bullets. But they find 9 bullets, but they find 9 cartridges, but they only find 8 bullets. Of the 8 bullets, they only decide to send 7 to the test, to be tested. And so they cannot say whether or not there were 2 guns used. So you know what? I'm going to say it. There were 2 guns used. And I'm going to say that because they found 9 cartridges. Okay? And that's a lot for one shooter to shoot. Especially when you got a shooter who's standing on the left side of the car who just puts a bullet through David Faraday's left temple. And then Betty's going to flee, right? See, this is the same problem you had at Cielo Drive, where people want to think that, you know, Patricia Hearst chased Abigail Folger down on the lawn and then stabbed her 28 times with an M7 bayonet that she didn't have and wasn't there, couldn't have done. That took 3 men to do Abigail Folger, 28 times with this weapon, attached to rifles. So there is no way that one person can neutralize a fleeing woman. And so in this case, you have a fleeing 16-year-old girl by the name of Betty Lou Jensen, and she's fleeing as fast as she can go, heading east, and she's shot 5 times in her back. And I'm going to tell you that that's probably 2 shooters shooting at her. And that the shooters had flashlight attachments, and I believe they used pistols, semi-automatic pistols, because of the rapid fire. The sequencing is very tight, similar to the Stephen Parent killing, although that could have been multiple rifles and riflemen. All right, so that's that. That's all there is. And so it's kind of a mystery, right? And the Solano County, which is the county that this occurred in, Lake Herman, Solano County Sheriff is in charge of the investigation, and there's no further information on this case, and it goes cold. You know, when we get out 7 months, we go, well, let's say 6 months, we go all the way out into July 4th. There's no information on this murder until we get to July 4th, which of course is a big holiday, America's birthday, right? And the city of Vallejo is a patriotic town where most people work for the federal government through the Navy. And the fireworks display in Vallejo is on the west side of town over there by Broadway and Highway 29, you know, where Paul Pelosi crashed his 911 Carrera Porsche into Jesus Lopez. Remember Highway 29? Well, I guess what? It comes down south and cuts through the city of Vallejo eventually. I don't think Paul Pelosi would have the nerve to drive through the city of Vallejo. It's too working class for a private banker type like him who likes to drink a lot. So probably Paul Pelosi's never visited the site of the Zodiac killings. But I have. So while most of the population is enjoying their festivities of the fireworks display, which would be over by Mare Island and the west side of Vallejo, near the shipyards, Darlene Ferrin, age 22, and Michael Majou, age 19, they get into Darlene's Corvair, if you remember that, the rear-engine Corvair, and they drive east, again, toward Lake Herman. But they don't go to Lake Herman. They get to Columbus Parkway, just like David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. They were on Columbus Parkway for a short way before they turned east onto Lake Herman Road. In this case, Darlene Ferrin, who was driving in her car, she was on Columbus Parkway going the exact same direction that Betty Lou had been driving 6 months before. And they don't turn right onto Lake Herman Road. They don't go east on Lake Herman. They continue north on Columbus Boulevard Parkway. It's called a parkway. And they don't go further. They don't go very far past Lake Herman Road. And there's this Blue Rock Springs Park, which is has a municipal golf course today. I don't think it was a golf course back then. It was just a park. And it's on both sides of Columbus Parkway. That's important. And so and the golf course is on both sides of Columbus Parkway. In other words, there's a east side portion of the golf course, there's a west side, and there's parking areas on both sides with trees. And in the case of Darlene Ferrin, she pulls into the east side, the right, off Columbus Parkway, and turns right again and parks in a parking area facing Columbus Parkway so that she can kind of sort of see traffic on Columbus Parkway, but yet still be private because there's some trees and hedgerows and there's a little sidewalk. So again, it's like a lover's lane, and there wouldn't be much traffic at this particular time on July 4th because, like I said, most people are about 6.5 miles away to the west enjoying the fireworks display. Again, this is around 10 o'clock at night. So it's after the fireworks display. Perhaps they did watch the fireworks display and then they decided to go to the opposite side of the city of Vallejo. But you're in the city limit on Columbus Parkway. So it's not the jurisdiction of the Solano County Sheriff. So they're there parking, and according to, we do have a witness, we have Michael Majou, because he survives the attack. They said that a car drove in and he sort of kind of thought it was like a Corvair like they had. Can't be sure though, because Michael Majou, he's not a very good witness, and he got shot 4 times. And I think if he was 100% healthy, he wouldn't be a good witness. He's got a lot of problems. I'm not going to get into all of his baggage. besides the fact he wears 3 pairs of trousers. It's just very strange. And it's July, so it would be a warm evening, right? So why do you need to dress like it's wintertime in Anchorage, Alaska? But that's what he does. So a car drives in, drives around the parking area where they were, leaves, disappears, and about 10 minutes later, the same car returns, pulls up behind them and parks, again with the headlights blinding the rearview mirror. And now you can't really see anything because you don't know if it's one person or 2 people or 3 people. You don't know because you got those headlights kind of blinding you. And of course, it's past 10 o'clock at night. It's dark. So anyway, a man walks up to the passenger side, the right side of Darlene's car, and the windows were rolled down, okay, to this car, probably because it was a warm evening. And the killer shoots at Michael Mageau, the passenger, and then he shoots Darlene, who's the driver, so now she can't drive away. He shoots Darlene Ferrin a grand total of 9 times. He shoots Michael Mageau 4 times. Mageau panics and jumps into the rear seat of this Corvair, if you can believe that, but that's where he was found. And the shooter apparently walked back to his car, then heard some noises that they believe Michael Mageau sighed or gasped. Then the killer returned and shot Michael Mageau, I think, a 4th time, and then shot Darlene Ferrin 2 more times. But we don't really know that for sure. This is the medical examiner supposition. There's no witnesses to this. Michael Mageau did say that he left and he came back and shot again, but he's dead. Can't keep track of how many bullets were shot. But they found 9 casings at the scene. So again, this is confusing because Darlene was shot 9 times and Michael was shot 4 times. That adds up to 13 casings that you would expect to find, but we only found 9, which means that 4 casings must have been picked up off the parking lot. 2 casings were actually found inside the passenger floorboard. So in other words, the killer must have shot Darlene from real close range, or shot Michael from close range from reaching inside the car. Then the shell casing dropped out onto the floor. So they found 2 of the 9 casings inside the car, and the other 7 were found in the parking asphalt beside the car on the right side of the car. And again, we just don't know if there was more than one shooter. I mean, it's a lot of shots, 13. So it's a 9mm. It's not a 22. It's 9mm. So a different type of pistol, different caliber. But it's possible there could have been 2 shooters working in tandem. That would make sense to me because then the gun won't overheat or jam. Because if you're trying to get off, 11 shots real quick, like a bunny rabbit, I don't know. I just think it's better to have 2 or 3 shooters. Like John Kennedy assassination, nobody's going to shoot more than once. 1 bullet only. That's all you get. And you got backup shooters to account for, a dozen shots. But no one shooter shoots more than 1 time in a professional manner. So anyway, I'm not grading this crime for full-on professionalism because you can see they're leaving cartridges. They left 9 cartridges at the first murder scene. They left 7 cartridges. Let me make sure I'm getting this straight here. So they found 9 bullets, but 7 cartridges, 8 cartridges at the first murder scene. And then they have 13 shots, 13 bullets, but they have only 9 cartridges. So we got 4 missing cartridges. And at the Lake Herman crime scene, we got 9 bullets and we only have 8 cartridges. See, so there's some of the cartridges were removed and some were left. Most of them were left. So that's not professional at all. You'll notice at the Cielo Drive crime scene where there were 7 .22 caliber rifle Super X bullets used, there were zero cartridges left. And there was William Garrickson left unharmed and 3 dogs on the property left unharmed. That's completely professional. In other words, the people that are supposed to get killed, and the murder weapons are not found, and the bullet cartridges are removed. And the people that are not supposed to get killed, which is 3 dogs and the pool boy, they're not harmed. They're put to sleep. That's as professional as you can get. We're not at that level of professionalism with the Zodiac. And by the way, we don't know it's the Zodiac yet. It's just another young couple, age 22. Darlene Ferrin is a mother. She has a daughter at home. She lives at 1300 Virginia Street, which, in case you didn't know, that's really close. That's 7/10 of a mile from where Arthur Lee Allen lives. It's half a block from the Superior Courthouse for Solano County is located at Solano Avenue and Virginia Street. Right at that corner is the courthouse. Anyway, so we don't really know what's going on yet, but the killer or killers leave, and guess where they drive? They drive to the county courthouse, the Solano County Courthouse, and they park across the street from the courthouse, and there's a payphone on Solano Avenue, and they call the Vallejo Police Department, which is at a different location than the courthouse, but not far. And they report a shooting at Blue Rock Springs of a woman and a boy. And they leave the phone, I believe, off the hook. And that payphone is just 1 block from where Darlene Ferrin actually lives at 1300 Virginia Street. Okay? And that's important because you should know that Arthur Lee Allen was invited to a housewarming painting party at Darlene Ferrin's home at 1300 Virginia Street in May of this year, in 1969. So not only is Arthur Allen familiar with using Darlene as a waitress at the International House of Pancakes, which is located about 300 feet from his bathroom, from his little apartment below his parents' house at 32 Fresno Street, he was in the habit of going over and having breakfast served by Darlene Ferrin, who was a waitress there, for several months before the shooting, since March up until 4th of July. So let's say, call that 3 months, right? He's been seeing her for 3 months, and she invited him to her housewarming party. His name appears on a typewritten list for that housewarming party. There was only 14 guests invited to that party, and Arthur Lee Allen was one of them. And by the way, he's 35 years old, and she's 22. She's 22, and he's 35, but she's his waitress, and he's a regular customer because his parents live 1 parking lot away from the International House of Pancakes on Tennessee. All right, so on the phone call, the person identifies themselves as Zodiac, and that is where Zodiac gets injected into the story. All right, so then, that's that. And then we turn our attention, of course, to, the moon landings, the Apollo 11, Art Linkletter's son-in-law getting whacked by a .38 caliber pistol in the back of the head in West Hollywood. And then we have the Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger bayonet murders at Cielo Drive, which is really Bella Drive. And then we have the next day on Sunday, August 10th, we have the Rosemary and Lino LaBianca bayonet, 51 bayonet strikes, 2 people. And then we have the reporting of the My Lai massacre, which had happened 18 months earlier. On March 16th, 1968, 504, mostly women and children, were murdered using the M16 rifle and the M7 bayonet. But that information was withheld and kept secret until after the Sharon Tate murders, and then that was reported. So that was the first use of the word bayonet, other than the Los Angeles police, who used the word bayonet multiple times in the very first preliminary report of the Sharon Tate murder, they used the word bayonet. They typed it. And they also used it again in their second preliminary report. And then Thomas Noguchi used it not in his medical exams. You'd think it would be used in the medical exams, but of course it was expunged from there. They had a grand total of three medical doctors perform the autopsy on 7 people, and the word bayonet never appears in the report. The dimensions of the M7 bayonet appear in the report, and that's what they testified to at the preliminary hearing and also at the murder trial. And only Thomas Noguchi, who was the chief medical examiner, he used the word bayonet whilst under oath. I'm sure each doctor was told not to use the word bayonet, because they want the jury to think that maybe this stupid buck knife was used when it wasn't. It's a single edge. It's not sharp on top. And all the wounds were double-edged, diamond-shaped, double-edged. And they meet the description of this weapon. All right. So now everyone's terrorized in 1969 in the state of California, the Golden State, because we have these killers on the loose killing, right? And one of them's named Zodiac. And then, oh my God, the My Lai massacre. Thank goodness that's in Vietnam, because that 504 is a big number. Then we get out to September 27th, 1969, and it's about 6:30 p.m., so the sun is still up. And we have 2 college students that attend Pacific Union College in Angwin. Angwin is fairly close by, but it's a pretty twisty road to go from Angwin, which is sort of very close to where Paul and Nancy Pelosi have a beautiful gated estate at number 2 Zinfandel Lane and Silverado Trail. Well, if you go up the hill on the east side of that Silverado Trail, all right, in close proximity to the Pelosi gated compound, you'll come to Pacific Union College. Yes, you will. And that is where Cecilia Shepard, age 22, attended, with Brian Hartwell, age 19. It's kind of the similar ages as Darlene Ferrin, who was 22, and Michael Michaud, who was 19. Isn't that a coincidence, right? So you have an older woman and a younger man. These 2 are students. It's a Seventh-day Adventist liberal arts college, Pacific Union College. It's a very small college. I did a mountain bike race there once, and there's a lot of poison oak. It's remote. It's remote, and it wouldn't be too hard to get down to the Pelosi house for a barbecue. However, all you got to do is just dive down that hillside. There's a couple of different roads you can take to get down to the Pelosi's. You got to know the cipher code, though, because they got a pretty menacing gate there. And it's by the historic stone bridge on the Napa River on Zinfandel Lane. You can't miss it. It's on the right. So, according to them, a man wearing a hood with a circle and a cross approached them with a pistol. They don't know what type. The pistol was not discharged, so there's no forensics on the pistol. Held them at gunpoint and tied them up with a plastic clothesline, something maybe you'd use if you were a fisherman, something like that. Anyway, so they had their wrists tied, and they were put face down, and then the man said that he was an escaped prisoner from Montana or Wyoming or something, and they couldn't get a good look at him because he's wearing this hood, this strange hood. And then he stabs Brian Hartwell, age 19. He stabs him 6 times in the back. 6 times. And really hard to get a handle on the weapon used because the reports are saying it's a 10-inch blade to 12-inch blade. There are knives that are that long. There are hunting knives that are that long. I think we've established that this is 7-inch, and this will kill you for sure. This is highly effective. But typically this is attached to a rifle. But in any case, that's so you can put your weight into it. But just alone, this is super lethal because it's double-edged. And most knives are not. They're single-edged. And the 10-inch blade knives are not that different than the buck knife. This is 7.5-inch buck knife. But again, on the top, they usually have a serrated edge at the top for cutting because they're hunting knives. They're designed to carve and cut meat off the bone. And there are serrated edges that can make that job easier when you're dealing with tendons and, difficult to serrate areas. So anyway, we don't really have a good description of the knife because, again, the victims were facing downward and they couldn't really see what was going on. But in the case of Cecilia, she was stabbed more. She was stabbed 10 times. She was stabbed 5 times in the back, and then when she was neutralized, she was stabbed 5 times in the chest. So she got it both sides. So that's 10 times for the woman, 6 times for Brian Hartwell. And then that's that. Then the killer walks away, taking his knife with him. And then someone, either the killer or the killer's partner, because I believe he had a partner, writes information regarding the first 2 crimes, the David Faraday and the Betty Lou Jensen, and the date of December 20th, 1968, and then writes, the 2 killings at Blue Rock Springs on July 4th, 1969, which then ties those 2 events with this event. Now, it could be different people, but this was public information, so it's not like this was jealously guarded information. This is information that was in the newspaper. The dates and the type of killing, like by knife, by gun. Because he also talks about the 2 people at Lake Berryessa by knife. And he writes that into the door, the right door of the Carmen Gia, which the victims drove over from Pacific Union College in the Carmen Gia. All right, so that's that. Then about an hour later, there's a phone call from a payphone in the city of Napa, downtown Napa, and 0.4 of a mile from the Napa Police Department, on the same side of the Napa River, but just right next to the Napa River, and on Main Street. And there's a phone call that goes in reporting the stabbings at Lake Berryessa, which of course is in the county of Napa. It's not in the city, right? It's way out to the east part of the county, up Highway 128 on Knoxville Grade Road at Spanish Flat, to be real specific. So again, he introduces himself as the Zodiac. So now you got the Darlene Ferrin, Michael Mageau, Cecilia Shepard, Brian Hartwell are all being described as Zodiac, and then the Zodiac indicating that he had killed the 2 teenagers in December 1968. So that's that. And nothing... Then the next thing that happens in this case is that the police are investigating. We got different police. So the Lake Berryessa killing, you've got the Sheriff's Department of Napa County looking into that. And they do reach out to some other people for help. The local Solano County is next to Napa County. And there is a person by the name of... by the way, the payphone used to call the Napa City Police is 1231 Main Street payphone. It was left off the hook too. That call came in around 7:40 p.m. It's about how much time it would take to drive from Lake Berryessa down Knoxville Grade to Highway 128, take 128 down to Silverado Trail, right where the Nancy Pelosi compound is, walking distance. But instead of going to Zinfandel Lane, you'd go the other direction, south, and go down below Yountville, and you'll find your way to the downtown of the city of Napa. in Napa Valley, in the county of Napa. So there's a police officer of Vallejo who got a tip from somebody. His name is John Lundblad. Officer John Lundblad, who I believe is the Vallejo Police Department. He drives over to 32 Fresno Street to interview Arthur Lee Allen, age 35, who's living with his parents at 32 Fresno Street. And he was looking forward to getting an alibi as to Arthur Lee Allen's whereabouts on September 27th, 1969, around 6:30 p.m. And so Arthur Lee Allen is very cooperative, and he says, I was at Fort Ross scuba diving. Now, that's Sonoma County, and that's pretty far away. And that's every bit of 60 miles to the west on very curvy roads over toward Bodega Bay, but north of Bodega Bay, north of Jenner, north of the Bohemian Grove, and also 13 miles west. Like 6 miles west and 6 miles north. So maybe it is 15 miles from the Bohemian Grove. He says he's scuba diving. And then to buttress his alibi, he says, my next door neighbor asked me about the knife that was on my car seat. And I told him I used it to cut up some abalone that I caught up there in Fort Ross. So then the police officer said, I'd like to talk to your neighbor then about that. And the neighbor's name, this is too CIA scripted to be a true story. But anyway, the guy's name is White. And let me get this straight here. If I can come up with this guy's name. Gee whiz. So I think his next door neighbor to his parents, his name is White, and and he's got a first name too. And the next door neighbor, who's an elderly gentleman, his name is exactly the same as the Lake Berryessa park ranger who's been doing interviews on television concerning the Zodiac stabbing at Lake Berryessa on September 27th. That he has the exact same name as the next door neighbor to Arthur Lee Allen. Anyway, I've got it here and I can't find it. But the guy has the same name. So the police officer asked to talk to him, and Lee says, you can't because he died. He died of a heart attack like a week ago. So he's not available. So in other words, Arthur Lee Allen has an alibi of his next door neighbor who saw him at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, meaning he couldn't have been at Lake Berryessa stabbing people if he's in his driveway talking to his neighbor at 4 p.m. because it's every bit of 37 miles to get to Lake Berryessa, and it's a real curvy road to get there. So I don't think it'd be possible. It wouldn't be possible to get back or to get up there, after talking to his neighbor. So anyway, we can't verify the alibi because the neighbor died of a heart attack, so he's dead. So nothing happens. And then we get out to the last Zodiac killing, which is it's just 1 week after the Art Linklater, Diane Linklater, getting thrown out of her window on the 6th floor with Ed Durston in her kitchen baking cookies on at 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. And Ed Durston lives in the apartment building across the street where Connie Monty lives. She's 31 years old. And then they both go to the funeral services for Diane Linklater on the 8th of October. And then when they come back from the funeral services for Diane Linklater, Connie goes into her apartment, takes an overdose of sleeping pills, and dies. And Ed Durston is her neighbor. And Ed Durston was in the kitchen of Diane Linklater across the street on the 6th floor when Diane did her Superwoman dive. And there are half a dozen CIA operatives that live in that apartment besides Connie Monty and Ed Durston. There's 4. that I won't get into, but there are 4 that come up in the Manson investigation that all lived at 1211 North Horn Avenue, which just happens to be across the street from where Diane Linklater gets murdered, by suicide out her 6th floor window at the Shoreham apartment tower. Okay, so the funeral service is on the 8th. Then the neighbor across the street, she dies. She's 31. She's dead. Now we go up to the 11th, October 11th, right? And we're in San Francisco at the corner of Mason and Geary. And you should know that that's 1 block from the Bohemian Club. It's 1 block from the Olympic Club. The Olympic Club and the Bohemian Club are side by side. And there's the Donatello Hotel, which I've stayed at right there. And this is where the Zodiac, or someone pretending to be the Zodiac, hailed a cab, Paul Stein, age 29, at that corner, 1 block from the Bohemian Club. And he tells the cabbie to go out to Presidio Heights, where the Pelosi family was living at the time. They're not necessarily in the story. It's just another coincidence they used to live there before they moved to Pacific Heights, allegedly on Pacific Avenue, and before they had their multi-million-dollar, wine country St. Helena estate at 2 Zinfandel Drive, which is about 65 miles away from their San Francisco mansion. All right, so again, it's 9:55 p.m. Seems to be the time that the Zodiac tends to strike, is around 10 p.m. So the cab pulls to the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets. They're both streets, Washington Street and Cherry Street, on the northeast corner. And I'll give you the address. Is 3898 Washington. Pulls up at the curb at 3898. It's a 2-story, beautiful home. I don't know what, it's probably a $10 million home today. Anyway, upstairs they had 3 little children of that home, and they must have been in the TV room or something. Again, it's 9:55 p.m. And when they heard a car pull up, the little boys, 2 girls, 2 sisters and a brother, and the little boy looked out the window where he sees Paul Stein falling onto this passenger seat of the front seat. So he thinks, oh, he must be sick. So he says that to his sisters, who then come to the window. So now you have 3 children, 3 young teenage kids, and they're all looking out the window. The Zodiac had just shot Paul Stein in the back of the head with a 9mm pistol. Not the same type of pistol used at the Darlene Ferrin, Blue Rock Springs, but a 9mm, same caliber. Anyway, he gets out of the passenger side, which is on the left, walks around to the right side of the car, opens the door, because now you have Paul Stein is laying there bleeding out, and takes a knife and cuts part of Paul Stein's shirt to put it in his pocket, as the girls, and I have the names of the 2 girls, Rebecca Robbins and Lindsay Robbins. I don't have the name of their brother, who first noticed the cab driver pull up with the yellow cab, Paul Stein. So they got a good look at the suspect. Unfortunately, the description has been modified and changed as time went by. Initially, they thought he was 5'10", 170 pounds. Well, actually, they thought he was 6 feet tall, 170 pounds. And then that got changed to 5'10", 180 to 200 pounds. And Arthur Lee Allen is 6'1", 241 pounds. So, barrel-chested. But that's not what the girls said. They said 6 feet, 170, which is more athletic. They did notice that his glasses were a specific kind of horn-rimmed glasses, the same general type that Art Linklater's son Robert wears. That's important because he gets weaved into the story, as well as the Sharon Tate murder, because those glasses matching that description were found at Cielo Drive by Sharon Tate's steamer trunks. And Robert would have had to have an extra pair of those glasses. And Victor Oda was his optometrist, and Victor Oda prescribed those prescriptions. And as you know, Victor Oda got shot in the back of the head twice, along with his entire family and his receptionist, and then thrown into the swimming pool. a year after this. A year after this Zodiac killing. A year later. That was like October 19th, 1970. The Ota family was executed. And he was the optometrist for Art Linklater's son, who also gets executed a few years later at age 33. No, 35. 35 years old. 35. All right, so that's enough for now. What does it all mean? And I'm going to tell you what it means. The media has ridden this wave of popularity for 50 years. And they made a Paramount Pictures, of course, made a movie about it. Melvin Belli had to inject himself into the story after the Paul Stein. So, look, that's too many CIA operatives. I don't believe the police. There was the San Francisco police with David Toshi and Bill Armstrong, and they did most of the legwork. However, they ruled out Arthur Lee Allen, which I don't believe you could ever rule him out at all, since he personally knew two of the victims. Because it turns out Darlene Ferrin was also the babysitter for Betty Lou Jensen. So those two knew each other, and Arthur Lee Allen knew both of them, and then they end up dying within 4 miles of his parents' home, and he went to her home. He went to Darlene's housewarming party, which is 7/10 of a mile from, he could walk to that home, and that's where Betty Lou went to high school. He could walk there too. So, and he was unemployed most of that 1969 year. He was mostly unemployed for most of that year. So what I'm telling you is that you had the Solano County Sheriff, the Vallejo City Police, the Napa City Police, who got the call, the Napa County Sheriff, then you have the San Francisco Police, so that's 5, and then you have the District Attorney of San Francisco, the District Attorney of Napa County, and the District Attorney of Solano County. So actually you have 8. Aaron Valente, you had 7. Okay? But the Zodiac, you had 8 law enforcement investigative agencies involved. And none of them cooperated with each other. Just like Aaron Valente. They didn't cooperate with each other in that case either. Which means the chances of you solving the case are 0. And there's a guy named Don Chaney who I think was involved as a partner of Arthur Lee Allen. But I also think that last Presidio killing could have been a different person than Don Chaney, who was Air Force and wore Wingwalker shoes. Wingwalker shoe prints were found at the Lake Berryessa crime scene. He is kind of a knucklehead, as is Arthur Allen. He's a knucklehead, and he was Navy, and he left on, it looks like, a medical discharge. That's another theme that comes up. Leonard Lake, Charles Ng, those two knuckleheads had, one went AWOL, the other one had a medical discharge. David Berkowitz of the Son of Sam, he went to Korea. He was United States Army. He probably may have had some psychological work done. Don't know, but he was kind of an amateur hour. The Son of Sam killings is 9 shooting victims and 6 died. So that's 7 that didn't die. In the Zodiac, you had 7 victims, 5 died. That's a higher percentage of success than Son of Sam, but it's still not at the level of Victor Ota, where you have 5 people out of 5 people and the cat. They killed the cat. And at Sharon Tate, you had 5 humans killed, 3 dogs not killed, 1 pool boy not harmed. That's the highest level of professionalism. And then over at Waverly, you got Lino and Rosemary LaBianca both stabbed 51 times. And the guy has 6 loaded pistols in the house. That's a really high level of professionalism when Lena LaBianca was 6 feet tall, 235 pounds, former military policeman, trained at Fort MacArthur, and he didn't get to his guns. And he was stabbed 10 times in the chest, and his wife was stabbed 41 times in the back and the chest, kind of sort of like Cecilia Shepard was, age 22 at Lake Berryessa. So the thing is that they had 2 dogs that were not harmed. So that's extremely high level of success when you can overcome a military policeman with 6 loaded pistols, neutralize him, stab him in the chest 10 times, stage the scene, right, death the pigs in the refrigerator, put a chef's knife in his chest. This is crazy professional. So I don't think these crimes were meant to be solved. I think they were meant to be kept open to create the psych ops that has gone on for over 50 years. But I do think there was adult supervision and invisible banking going on here, shadow banking going on, because the last killing, of course, happened where Colonel Paul Tate, Sharon Tate's father, resided in the Presidio, and the killer was seen by those little girls as walking up Cherry Street, and then a different witness saw him walk down Maple to Spruce, and then walk on to the Army base at Spruce. Never to be seen or heard from again until Melvin Belli gets involved. And whenever you have a CIA attorney who got Jack Ruby convicted, and you're in close proximity to Louis Jolion West, an MK Ultra psychiatrist, and you're in close proximity to Sharon Tate's father, who's Operation Gladio murderer, and his daughter gets bayoneted 16 times, and he lives in close proximity to the Paul Stein killing, and Michael Aquino moves into that location on the Army base. And you got the other crazy people working out of Haight-Ashbury, all going on at this time, with Enos Mejia down there running the show, Abigail Folger's mother, the private banker. Anyway, it's just too much CIA concentration for me, so I'm calling the last killing CIA all the way. The Paul Stein yellow cab driver getting picked up near the Bohemian Club, I'm calling that a CIA assassination. The Arthur Lee Allen, Don Chaney, who was a life insurance salesman at the time, which is code for flexible schedule. I think those two partnered, and I believe they had a lookout radio man or radio men working with them to make sure they didn't get busted, because they weren't busted, they weren't caught. And there were other people that were driving around in the area, and they didn't get caught. So the facts are they didn't get caught. So, and as far as the Zodiac messaging and all that, I think that's a separate psych ops, and I think that would have been handled by different people than the actual killer. You know, that's part of the diversion, because that's part of CIA. They always want to go have an extra rabbit hole for you to climb down. Well, that's my thought on today. If you're interested in this kind of thing, believe me, there's plenty more you can talk about. But I believe that Arthur Lee Allen and Don Chaney were involved with the killing of 4 of the 5 people that were killed, and were involved with 6 of the 7 victims, were stabbed or shot with Zodiac. And I think that Don Chaney and Arthur Lee Allen were involved with 6 of the 7. I'm not sure about the 7th one. Maybe it could have been Arthur Lee Allen, but it's just not his style. It's not his style. He was more of sneaking up on people and shooting them, not riding around in a cab, and certainly not entering Army officer housing at Julian Kahn Park at 10 p.m. at night. I think that's an officer of the United States Army Intelligence. And I have a feeling that it could have been a person who was with NATO, Operation Gladio, and then flown out of the country. There were numerous fingerprints found on the yellow cab, but you see, the problem is they were former fares, and they think that the cab drivers, the fingerprints on the passenger door of the front seat belonged to Zodiac, but didn't match Arthur Lee Allen. And I don't know that they fingerprinted Don Chaney. I'm pretty sure they did. He was a very strange bird, and I think his participation into helping the case for Arthur Allen along was prompted by the invisible hand. In other words, I don't think he volunteered to do that. I think he was paid to do that. That's my thoughts on the subject. Take care. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.